Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for your interest and for attending tonight, the 2023 Fellowship and Specialist Training Programs Information Evening. My name is Tom McMillan, President of the Australian College of Physiotherapists. I'd like to start tonight by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on today, pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. I've introduced myself. We're very fortunate tonight also to be joined by Elisa McLaughlin, who is a specialist musculoskeletal physiotherapist and chair of the Fellowship Pathways Standing Committee. She is also the interim chief censor of the Board of Censors. We also have tonight Vice President Professor Barbie Singer, an APA neurological physiotherapist and fellow by original contribution. Tonight, we also joined by college staff, including the head of college, Tamara Rowan, Jennifer Keating, who is the training and assessment lead who oversees specialisation training, Bridget McAuliffe, who coordinates assessment, and also Priya Rodriguez, who coordinates titling. Thank you for both staff and for fellows for attending. You'll also tonight have the opportunity to hear from a recent fellow by original contribution, from a current registrar in the training program, and from someone who's recently completed their specialisation training, which should provide you with some great insights. Let me talk a bit about the college. So the college was inaugurated in 1971, which is a little more than 50 years ago, 52 years, right about now this year. And recently we've welcomed titled physiotherapists in as members of the college, recognising that milestone that people reach as they progress on their career towards fellowship of the college. It's important to understand the APA career pathways framework. Most people enter as a general member at foundation level, which we call level 1. People become an intermediate clinician, where there are still an APA general member at that intermediate level. Entry to the college is at titling, when you become highly developed, and fellowship is the 4th level. And only people who are already members of the Australian College of Physiotherapists, as recognised by titling, are eligible to proceed onto specialisation or fellowship. Why do we have this career pathway? We recognise that we need reward and recognition to recognise achievement across physiotherapy careers. We make sure that physiotherapy owns and accredits the standards and competencies and measures learning outcomes, both within the profession, what's provided by the APA, and also externally. We're about creating greater choice, flexible delivery of education and learning, and we want our qualifications to be recognisable for patients, funders and referrers. And for those of you that might already be members of the college, you would have seen the start of a suite of digital assets released recently, including things like logos for members of the college and also for fellows. The new portfolio for credentialing at the titled level has already been released. A lot of the APA courses that are being revived are matched to the competency framework now, and will match be recognised on your career pathway. A lot of the blended learning, interactive learning and practical workshops will be recognised on the pathway. And going forwards, we're looking at partnerships with universities, micro-credentialing, customised courses, and underway is currently development of a revised program. And we're really integrating the college career pathway across many APA clinical streams, and looking at how we're going to credential or provide certificates in areas that might be high risk or unique in terms of training. So that might let you know some of the things that we're doing. Recent achievements would be including the competence framework. We've really clearly defined what a specialist is in Australia, and we have new and revised pathways, either released or in development. We had our first pain specialist, Tim Austin, in 2021. We've got leadership cancer palliative care, lymphedema pathways in development, and we're also working on advanced musculoskeletal practice. We're mapping these streams against the competency framework version 7 that we've designed. There are, of course, 2 different pathways. The first part of this presentation will focus on specialisation, which is the clinical pathway. The other way to fellowship is via an academic pathway, which is by original contribution. We'll talk about that after we've talked about specialisation tonight. How many of us are there currently? That's a good question. There are more than 200 fellows by specialisation and original contribution across Australia, and we have about 25 registrars currently in the program. If you're coming to the conference in Brisbane in October, you'll see our biggest graduation ever, where we'll have around about 35 graduates receiving their specialisation or fellowship certificates. Why fellowship? Fellowship recognises people with advanced expertise in their relevant area of practice. It's a mark of distinction. It demonstrates leadership. It provides you with a career pathway beyond what you might get from titling or from your master's degree level. You join a unique professional network and unique professional support, which I have to say I use regularly and is very helpful in my clinical work. It attracts the respect of other peers, and I think fellowship is very well recognised by other professions, especially in healthcare, especially by our medical colleagues, and they understand the rigour that comes with programs of fellowship or specialisation. It provides your patients with improved care and better outcomes, and the pragmatics are that those people that become fellows or specialists will find that they improve their remuneration. They might regrade higher in public health, and certainly some roles uniquely seek out specialist clinicians. It increases the strength of applications for those that might do an academic pathway where they apply for grants and fellowship in research or academic careers. I'm now going to pass on to Elisa, who will tell you some of the nuts and bolts about fellowship by clinical specialisation. Thanks, Elisa.
Thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to be able to give people more information about the pathway and what it involves. Next slide, thank you. So these are the current disciplines that we have the specialisation training program in. So across a wide range of physiotherapy fields, which is great to see. And as you mentioned before, there are some further ones in development, but at the moment, these are the disciplines in which we have the program running. It's a before I go into that, so the entry requirements are that you're a registered physiotherapist in Australia, that you're a member of the APA and a member of the Australian College of Physiotherapists as well. You do need to have your titling and qualification, whether that's through an academic or an experiential pathway. And we recommend at least 3 years of full-time clinical practice within your discipline-specific area before undertaking the pathway, the training program. Next slide. So other, not as much entry requirements, but desirable attributes, because these are all involved in the program. So if you're already doing some of these things in your professional life, then that's highly attractive. And so also involvement in teaching, in whether that's within your clinical or university space, involvement in research across many different areas, being part of the wider physio community, professional, social media, different ways that you're staying connected and staying up to date, and also showing that you are committed to continuing professional development within your field as a clinician. So there are a number of, it's a unique program in that it's not like if some of you may have come from a master's program in a university, it's not a defined curriculum where you sit down and get given information and learn it and then bring it back to us. It's very individualized and adult learning type style. So depending on where everyone comes from, a different professional background and different level of skills in different areas. They develop their own, they do their own SWOT analysis and develop their own learning contract on what they need to do to get themselves to specialist level. These are, and there's a virtual portfolio that is maintained online throughout the whole program, where they can show they're continuing to work in certain areas to develop these specialist skills. Broadly, though, the program will involve time spent with other specialists and learning from them. It will be practicing your own clinical work in your own clinical field, but then engaging in critical analysis and self-reflection and a higher level of clinical reasoning around your own daily clinical practice. There will be times where you're just diving deep into topics and becoming up to date with all the evidence around certain topical areas in your discipline. And there will be times where there's a lot of mentoring, whether that's peer-to-peer or with other experts, both within physiotherapy or other fields of healthcare, where you are also developing skills of a specialist through that. And that's something that I know a lot of people find really useful with the program. Thanks, Tom. So the way that it works is that you get allocated a cohort at the maximum of 4 people who are also registrars within your discipline. With that, you'll have a facilitator who is a specialist in the area already, and they help you along the whole journey across the 2 years. There are 4 formal face-to-face sessions that occur each year. So across the 2 years, you have 8 of those. The time of these depends on how many in your cohort. So we allocate half a day per registrar. So if you have 4 in your cohort, then that's a 2-day face-to-face that you will need to do every 3 months. There is a bit of flexibility around that, but as long as that time commitment is honoured somehow. And then during that time, so within those 3-month times where you're doing stuff with your cohort and your facilitator, you're doing many other self-directed activities. So that will be things with peers, other registrars. There'll be just study you're doing at home on your own, meeting with other health professionals, whatever you feel you need to do. We assess across 4 elements, so it's not just clinical work as you may expect. So we call that element 1, which is development of specialist skills in the area of practice. So that's becoming the kind of, I suppose, our understanding of clinical specialisation. But also we want specialists to be leaders in the field and leaders in the profession. So there also needs to be demonstration of development of participation of education in the profession, and there's flexibility within that, but that's either at within clinic level, across clinics, undergraduate university, postgraduate university, some PD courses that are being run by the APA. Also continued participation in professional development activities yourself, attending courses, and some participation in research activities. And again, there's flexibility within that. Some people are doing PEDRA reviews, some people are doing systematic reviews for a PhD student, others are being a research assistant in a research study. So there's flexibility within all those elements, but there does need to be demonstrated activity in those 4 elements of the training program. Did we just skip one? No? No. So when you have your face-to-face sessions with your cohort, that's often very clinically based. So there will often be a clinical examination done by yourself and by other registrars, and that's being observed by your peers and your facilitator. And that's a great time for feedback and critical analysis of your own where you're at with your clinical reasoning and clinical skills. There may be times when the facilitator is sharing some knowledge that they have in their field. There could be times where you've prepared a literature review about a certain topic and you're sharing that with your cohort. So that could vary a little bit what happens, but generally there's always an emphasis on a patient interaction at those face-to-face sessions as well. And as the program, as you continue through the program, there are probably more of those clinical interactions or mock examinations to prepare you for your final exams. Thanks, Tom. This is just an example of PebblePad, which is the virtual platform that we use to log all the evidence and work that the registrars are doing. So there is a component of written work that does need to be required in the program as well. That's quite small, but down there you can see a little bit of a learning contract that someone's written in about how they're going to develop their specialist skills in the level of knowledge of pain, I think it says. But that's an example of that. And then if we continue on, the other written work requirements are obviously to begin with your SWOT analysis and developing your learning contract. So that's saying what you're going to do, which is an important part to get started. There are across the program 2 formal case presentations, written case presentations that are 2,500 words each that get assessed. And one of those does need to be presented orally through the program. There are reflections, which is 4 reflections every 6 months that need to be written and uploaded. And so they can be varied, but essentially they may be you analysing your clinical reasoning around a certain patient that you've seen, or your observations of another specialist and how that might change your clinical practice. They can be quite varied, but are an important part of the program as well to demonstrate your development and learning. Other written work is that we do need to see that you are being active in the program. So you do need to be uploading evidence that you are attending courses, what you're getting out of courses, that you're doing some literature review. Any work that you're doing does need to be kind of documented and uploaded in PebblePad. And there's also a professional issues essay, which you get to choose the topic around your area, or a professional issue for physiotherapy as a whole that needs to be submitted towards the end of the program as well. In terms of time and study requirements, that's an important thing to understand, because it is a significant commitment. It's absolutely worthwhile and worth doing, and it's very doable, but it is a commitment. So you need to make sure you've had to think about where you're at in terms of work and life and family to commit to the program. So you do need to attend the face-to-face sessions. They obviously in COVID were all virtual, and depending on geography, many cohorts do often do a lot of virtual meetings rather than always flying in or meeting together physically face-to-face, but that does need to occur. So that's once every 3 months, and the time commitment depends on the size of your cohort. It could be half a day or it could be 2 days, depending on how big your cohort is. You do need extra time in your schedule just to do the other work, so that the theory components that you want to delve into, time to write your reflections, upload it all up to PebblePad. So there needs to be time to do all that background kind of increasing your knowledge that needs to happen. There's also time for other professional development that you might need that you want to undertake, specific courses. And there is a minimum requirement for clinical work being 8 hours a week, because it's obviously important that you're continuing to practice these new skills. So you still need to keep working clinically at least 8 hours a week. So there's no defined time that you need to have in your schedule, and it does through the 2 years. It can be a little bit up and down. There'll be times where there's a lot going on and you're very busy with it, and other times where it's ticking along and not so onerous. So there's variability, but you can see there some average estimates from previous participants in the program have been, 10 to 15 hours a week on average, and then that does often increase in the last 6 months in preparation for exams. Thanks, Tom. So I think I'm handing back to you. So I've talked about what it involves, and we're going to go a little bit more about the assessment part of it. But I think we're going to hear from someone about why it is a fabulous thing to do and absolutely worth the time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa, for giving us the nuts and bolts about the program. But I think there's nothing better than hearing from someone that's recently completed the training and someone who's currently doing it. So we're very lucky tonight to be able to hear from, firstly, Alicia Rayner, who, if you can unmute, we can get you on screen. Very interested to hear, Alicia, if you're unmuted there, if you would like to just introduce yourself, perhaps tell us a bit about where you work, and also what motivated you to start on this journey.
So, hello, I'm Alicia Rayner. I'm a specialist musculoskeletal physiotherapist. I passed the exams in July last year, so very recent graduate to the college. I moved back. I was living in Melbourne, originally from WA, moved back to WA in 2019, just before COVID hit. And after working there for 9 months by myself, thought that I needed more motivation and just wanted to connect with other physios again. And I was a bit of a physio nerd, wanted to talk about different conditions and just be challenged a bit more, and was starting to notice that I was slipping into bad habits. So signed up for the fellowship and got accepted into the program. And yeah, my first day was the 1st of April 2020. So then COVID hit at the same time. So it's hard to, a lot of my memories of specialisation emerged in with COVID, so I can't really remember a lot of it. But yeah.
It must have been challenging, Alicia, I guess, embarking on a process like that with COVID to deal with at the same time. But you still got a smile on your face and you did get through it. So can you tell me, what did you really enjoy about that process?
I think COVID, for the first part, it made it a lot easier. So the first 6 months of COVID was the first section of the program, so the first quarter. You had no other option to study. There was no social life anyway, so every weekend I was just studying. I think it really helped with a lot of being in country WA, there wasn't the focus on face-to-face, so there was a lot more online resources available, a lot more Zoom meetings. We were catching up every month or so with a specialist that was doing an online meeting that we would organise, so presenting on their areas of expertise. So I found it really nice to connect with people, and people that were all in a similar place where they'd done a lot of the new grad training, they'd then done their masters, and then they were just a bit, or not stuck, but do we go into research? Do we become more leaders in the profession? So we were all at that same path or that same junction in our careers where what was next. So yeah, I found it very fun.
Talking about having gone through the experience, Alicia, we and made it through. We hear a lot about the exams and things like that, which we know are challenging. That would have been one of your challenges, I imagine. What other challenges do you think you faced apart from undertaking the process in COVID?
I didn't meet my cohort, so we had all of our 8 face-to-faces online. So I met my facilitator face-to-face 6 months after passing the exams. So that was probably the biggest challenge. But on the other side of that, I became a lot closer with the other WA group. So they were the year above me. And then some of the other the pain specialists, so people that were geographically closer but different year groups. So I think on the one hand, I didn't have as close a relationship with my cohort, but I had a much closer relationship with other year groups, and then we could all link in together. Probably the constant guilt of I haven't done enough. That was probably the biggest challenge, was knowing when to just have, I think for the 2 years, I took 3 weeks off, and each time it was to write a case study and do mocks in Perth. So I didn't really have holidays for 2 years, which it was COVID anyway. So, but I think just having that, if I watch a movie, will that detract 2 hours from my pebble pad? That was probably the biggest challenge for me, was trying to give myself a break and give myself permission to rest.
Yeah, I think it's a really challenging balance, isn't it? And like we've been discussing with Elisa before, it really is adult and somewhat self-directed learning. You need to identify your weaknesses and address them. But what I really like that you said, Alicia, is that it is a college of fellows, and the support that other fellows and other registrars provide each other is amazing, and it's certainly a sense of belonging that I haven't had anywhere else in the physiotherapy profession until I became a fellow, or became a registrar. What impact has it had on your career, Alicia? What changes has it made?
Yes, so I was already doing a lot of teaching at APA level with spinal courses and things. But I think the second opinion work, I'm doing a lot more second opinion work now, referrals from orthopedic surgeons, rheumatologists, neurologists. Research, I never liked research, but I'm now involved in research that I enjoy doing. So I'm a clinical mentor on a research paper at the moment looking at online learning versus one-on-one clinical mentoring, which is sort of an area that I'm interested in that I didn't realize you could research. What else? I've been asked to present on or to write the new spinal courses coming out with people like Paul Hodges and John Ford, which just even being in the same email as those names is massive. The fact that they know who I am is quite exciting. Have been just being able to email people like Gwen Jull and ask her a question and she knows who I am and she doesn't dismiss my question is really nice. I think they're probably the main things. And I feel like even clinically, passing the exams was good, but I feel like I've exponentially improved even since then. I think I thought that I would get to the exams and that would be the best that I was, because Alistair Flett said he wouldn't pass the exams now. I think he's lying. But he said, oh, that was the smartest I've ever been in my career. So I really thought that I would get to that point and it'd be a downhill spiral again. And I would, 2 years after the Masters, you feel like you need a new challenge. But I feel like I'm now analysing things differently and I'm constantly challenging myself rather than, or noticing new things that I think we should look more into this, or how can we change this, so I think I'm an exponentially better physio than I was a year ago when I passed, which is nice. And I think probably the biggest thing has been trusting myself as a physio rather than trying to be a specialist like Alistair Flett or Gwen Jull. It's knowing that I have a different perspective to offer, which I think has been that it's still at an expert level, but it's different to what other experts might say, but it's still appropriate.
I think that's great, Alicia, and I think that says that you've got a new confidence in your abilities and you feel like you've got a great group of fellows that support you. And I agree with what you're saying. I think that you graduate as a specialist, but you don't ever stop learning. And part of the program is that you truly become a very competent adult learner and good at identifying your own weaknesses. So, Alicia, thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully you can stay online for some questions. If anyone does have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. You won't be able to talk unless I let you, but you certainly can type your questions. And I know we've got a couple already, which we will get to. Next tonight, very pleased to introduce you to Bryce Pennicott, who is a registrar in the sports and exercise specialty and also the president of the Tasmanian branch of the APA. So thanks very much for joining us, Bryce. So you're 6 months in, Bryce, as I understand. Tell me what got you onto the program? Why did you do that? Was it too much talking to me?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Basically, I've been planning on doing specialisation ever since I was a new graduate. So when I was first out of uni, I got a job in a private practice, and one of the partners in that practice was going through the program at the time. The level of knowledge, both clinically and academically, that he had while he was going through that sort of process was basically just superior to anything else I'd come across. I'd worked and come across plenty of highly respected physiotherapists that weren't specialists, and they were amazing in their own right, but just the breadth of knowledge that my boss had at that point in time while going through the program, it was just better, basically. It was broader and it was backed by the available evidence at the time. And from that, I just decided if I'm going to sort of work through this career pathway, I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't aim for specialisation.
Yeah, that's great, Bryce. So you're doing the program from Tasmania. What I imagine that's one of the challenges. What are your other challenges that you faced in the first 6 months?
Yeah, it's location is certainly a challenge. Being down here in Tasmania, we don't get a lot of face-to-face professional development, so I'm being forced to sort of source that other ways. A lot of online learning. There's a lot of good resources now, which makes it much easier. But to be honest, I'm doing a lot of travel, so I'm probably flying to various states once to twice a month, sometimes more than that, which it does take its toll a little bit. The other thing is I'm still working full time at the moment. In terms of the actual hours I'm putting into working through the program, I think it's probably about 10 hours a week. Sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes it's a bit less based on what's going on. But yeah, time and travel for me are the challenge. And I think I'd be doing the other registrars a disservice if I didn't mention Pebble Pad has its quirks, and there is a little bit of a learning curve with that one.
Yeah, it does indeed. What are you enjoying, Bryce? What are you enjoying about it?
I think the best thing is just access. You have access to so many experts in their own field, and they're incredibly generous with their time. So just being able to talk to other specialists and have them talk to you like a colleague, you're constantly learning different tips and tricks. And I think it's the first time in a long time where I feel like I'm continually developing. It reaches the point, I think, when you've got a bit of experience where you start to stagnate a bit. And I think this whole process forces you to reflect and improve.
It does. It can be a bit confronting, can't it, Bryce? And you really do look at what you're not strong at, and probably also have other people point out what you need to be better at, which is challenging, but it's also a great opportunity for development. Is it having an impact on your practice already, Bryce? What do you know?
I've actually been surprised how much it actually has. I don't think it's drastically changing my treatments at this stage, but I'm much more aware of why I'm doing what I'm doing and being much more thorough in basically every aspect of patient care. I think just having the knowledge about why you're doing things and why you might pick one treatment over another, and including just being aware of what literature is out there. It's very easy to get quite complacent and just think, well, this works for me, why would I bother changing? But going through the program, you're forced to think about, why am I doing what I'm doing? And yeah, that has to have an impact on your clinical practice. From a career perspective, a few little things are starting to change, nothing just yet, but I can already see how it can have an impact in the future.
That's great, Bryce. We've got one question from the audience, and Jenny Phillips has asked, how have you managed to work full-time, being the chief of the Tasmanian APA and doing all this at once? Is it feeling like too much at times?
So I work my full-time hours in 4 days, which means I've got a full day to work on specialisation stuff. Most of the APA work is out of hours, so it's evening stuff like this, although I must admit I'm getting ready to cut my hours back at work. I'm coping at the moment, but I'm not sure for how much longer.
Thanks very much, Bryce. I really appreciate you joining us. Hopefully you can stick around in case there are more questions for you as the current registrar. But I appreciate you coming along tonight and spending that time with us, giving your insights. How do you get assessed and how do you get examined? Basically what happens is your facilitator will present a 6-monthly report on you or each of the registrars, detailing your progress against each element of the training program, and what we any aspects that aren't satisfied, I guess, will need to be addressed by the registrar working with the facilitator. Registrars are required to complete the written elements, successfully complete the mandatory mock examinations, and complete requirements of their learning contract across the 4 elements before they go to exams. Final exams are held over a 2-day period, at the end of the 2 years. It includes an oral viva examination, which is on a broad range of topics that registrars are aware of, and practical examinations of 2 clinical cases run over 2 days. So typically the candidate will have an initial assessment with a patient and a subsequent appointment on the following day. And the candidates are required to develop and to demonstrate specialist level skills as judged by the appointed examining panel. And the pass rate's currently sitting at 73%, which is comparable or better with any of the other colleges that you might hear of. So we've been really pleased to have great successes in examination because the program's so rigorous. The examinations are challenging, and they're necessarily so to make sure that we have a very deliberately have a very high standard that we assess people against. They're challenging, but they're something that people get a lot of opportunity to practice for along their journey. And so many registrars, by the time to get to the examinations, while they're very nervous, it's something that they've done many times. A little about the Board of Censors. The Board of Censors is responsible for oversight of the program, and they will provide advice to Fellowship Program Standing Committee. Board of Censors, of course, the Board of Censors chair being Elisa, acting, and also the chair of Fellowship Program Standing Committee is Elisa. And those reports that come to those groups determine whether a registrar can continue in the program and continue to progress. The Board of Censors has discipline-specific knowledge and a member responsible for that given cohort. There's lots of communication between the facilitator and the Board of Censors with regard to the discipline-specific member, and those things happen on a regular basis prior to Board of Censors meetings. And facilitators and registrars are both able to contact the Board of Censors with any issue or for guidance or assistance. How much does it cost? It's a really good question. It's the application fee for this year, for next year will be $295, and the training program total costs $13,200. It's in 3 different components, once on acceptance, once on the second year, and the fee for examinations is $3,300. Those prices may change, but may not be likely to change for next year. And I think the panel members might agree that while the cost here may not be very high compared to other things like perhaps a postgraduate master's degree, there are some other costs which typically registrars will incur, like for things like travel and time away from work to allow completion of the program. And we do increasingly use virtual live streamed options, and of course, registrars do need to meet the cost of attending professional development on their own. But as Bryce has said, one of the great things about being a registrar is exceptional access, and many fellows are very generous with their time, including letting people have supervised practice and masterclasses and things like that just on request, which is lovely. Important dates for you to know. The 6th of September is tonight. That's the information evening. Applications will open very soon on the 18th. They close on the 16th of October, not too far after the conference. We'll do interviews around November with applicants advised whether or not they're accepted in December. The training program doesn't start until April 2024, so there's some lead time. Applications, importantly, by original contribution, not for the specialist program, can be submitted at any time. We are now going to hear about fellowship by original contribution by research, and fellowship by original contribution is the academic pathway to fellowship. This involves either submission of an original scientific or academic piece of work, either by published papers, 3 to 5 substantive papers, where the candidate is the sole or primary author, and it's independent of their higher degree. It could be via a textbook or monograph. And as fellow by original contribution, importantly, cannot refer to themselves as a specialist. Barbie, would you like to continue?
Thanks, Tom. We did have somebody else lined up, a very recent graduate by original contribution, but she's been held up. So I will just address these few slides and then also give some feedback from this recent graduate if she doesn't get here before then. So original contribution was the original pathway to fellowship back when the college started over 50 years ago. And we've since awarded 25 fellowships by original contribution. And we've got 6 candidates currently in the program. So this research pathway is also under review and will be updated within the next year or so. But it's important to understand that this is a pathway that is designed for clinicians who have gone a little bit more in the academic direction. And if Jo does get here in time, she'll talk a little bit about the reason she chose this research pathway instead of the clinical pathway. But I'm also a fellow by original contribution, so I can tell you about what guided my choice. So it's really a pathway that for many people is post-PhD. So somebody who is still researching after their PhD and might decide that they want to pursue fellowship by this research pathway. They get allocated a supervisor, and there's a working party that oversees their candidacy. So like the specialisation pathway, it's a 2-year pathway, but lots of people don't require the full 2 years. They might apply for the pathway where they've already got quite a bit of the work done. But if they do, once they're in the pathway, they are going to be kind of monitored by that working party, and their supervisor will submit 6 monthly reports until such time as they submit their thesis. Thanks, Tom. So I'm just going to check again that we haven't got Jo in the room, and it doesn't look like it. So she is, as I said, a very recent graduate. She's a sports and exercise science clinician, and she has just very recently completed her original contribution thesis. When she was asked to comment on what motivated her to complete original contribution, she said that as someone who's now more academic than clinical, so she only worked 0.2 in a clinical role, the specialisation process wasn't really a good fit. But she wanted to go through a rigorous process to be recognised at the highest level of the profession, that she wanted to pursue fellowship, and so the original contribution pathway was the most appropriate. Tom, do you want to go through these questions, or will I just continue to speak to the notes that Jo's given me?
I could ask you if you like, Barbie.
Thank you.
What did she enjoy about the process, and what did she think were the challenges?
Well, I could concur with her response, which is that she was a number of years post-PhD when she enrolled into the original contribution pathway, and so was I. And the original contribution pathway caused her to look back on the work that she'd done post-PhD and reflect on the kind of the big picture of her research program. So to kind of look at the story and the narrative, and that's a really key part of original contribution. You're putting together a set of papers with an introduction and a discussion chapter, but the key element is that you have to be able to report what is the contribution that you've made to physiotherapy practice. So what does your research mean to physiotherapists? And so Jo says that she really enjoyed that looking back over the sort of story on the narrative of her research and its contribution, and that she found that very satisfying, as well as helping her to identify where to go next. Because I think when you kind of look back at the big picture, then you also get a sense of where you might go in the future. Jo has just joined us. Jo, I've answered the first couple of questions that are on the screen here, but I'm very
Hi, Barbie.
to hand to you. Sorry to throw you right in it.
No, that's okay. And if you want me to start my video, it's just not letting me. It says the host has disabled.
It's fine.
Video
it's
share.
fine.
So
we can hear you. We've got the lovely picture of you. So I think Tom's going to ask you now about what you enjoyed and what the challenges were.
Yeah,
yes,
great.
That's what we're up to, Jo. Thanks very much for joining us. So yes, what did you enjoy and what did you find were the challenges?
I think the thing that I really enjoyed, as someone who I completed my PhD almost 10 years ago, and for those of us who sort of have that academic pathway, you'll remember the PhD is really good because you've got this sort of story that you're working towards building, and you have a really clear pathway. And then when you finish, you tend to do lots of different things, and sometimes you can lose sight of what your research program should be about. And the thing that I really enjoyed, I think, was the opportunity to reflect on what I had done in terms of, and building a story around that. So bringing together all of those original publications and really finding, I guess, the story of your research, which I found really good just because it was enjoyable to reflect and look back on it, but also it gave me a good, I think, a clear understanding of perhaps where some of the gaps in the literature were, which sometimes you don't always see when you just do a paper here and a paper there. To bring them all together, it became really clear perhaps where the gaps were and what the next steps in my research program should be. And last year I was lucky enough to get a NHMRC investigator grant, and for that you need to put together a 5-year program of research of what you're going to do. And I think probably doing the original contribution gave me, probably helped me do that, because it helped me identify where the gaps were and what my bigger picture direction should be over the next period of time.
That's really great, Jo, and I think that probably speaks to some of the impact it's had on your career. What motivated you to get started, Jo, on that process?
I think probably just the opportunity to, like, if I was a clinician, I would have gone down the specialisation pathway, but I still do clinical practice, but now I'm mostly working research. And I think, so the specialisation pathway wasn't appropriate for me, but it was an opportunity for me to, I guess, achieve sort of the highest level of recognition within our profession, but in the pathway that I was working in, rather than in that sort of specialised clinician pathway.
Yeah,
that was the motivator.
That's great, Jo. What other impacts do you think it's had? You spoke a bit about, how it's influenced, I suppose, your planning of your future career and particularly your research. What other impacts do you find it's had on your practice and career?
Look, I think it's a little bit early to say, because I was only awarded the award a couple of months ago. So I think certainly from what colleagues have said to me, I think it's just that extra recognition that perhaps within the profession and also externally to the profession, that you are acknowledged as being an expert and having made a substantial original contribution to our profession in Australia. I think that there's that recognition sort of both within the profession and also externally to the profession as well, sort of a branding almost to be a fellow of the college.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Jo, and thanks so much for joining us. I might now move on to our Q&A. So if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the Q&A box. I'm going to stop sharing so we can answer some of these questions live if the panelists don't mind turning on their cameras. If you'd like to take down the details of who to contact, I'd encourage you to do that on the screen right now. I wanted to mention that conference is a great opportunity to learn more. At conference, you'll find that the college, we are launching the new Milestone 3 portfolio pathway to titling. That'll be a session before lunchtime on the Friday. If you're already a member of the college who's considering specialisation, you are invited to come to the college meeting, which will be directly afterwards. And of course, if you're attending the Ignite conference, you shouldn't miss the graduation, which will be held late on the Friday afternoon, where we'll have around 35 new fellows, which we welcome into the college. It's a really significant event, and we've got some wonderful speakers, so I hope you will come and join us there. I look forward to seeing you. I'll stop sharing my screen now, but we might go to some of these questions. And one of the questions that's been asked, and perhaps I can throw to some people on the panel, is about career opportunities, and in particular, what kind of financial benefits might come from being a specialist or a fellow. Perhaps, could I throw to you, Alicia, so you could talk to that?
Yes. So I work in private practice. Working in private practice, you obviously set your own fees, but as a specialist, you're considered more qualified than a master's, obviously. So I charge the specialist rates, which is a higher per hour rate than what a master's physio would charge. The other opportunities, yes, definitely been asked to present courses which are paid. Things like tonight I do for the love of physio, but and because I want more people to become specialists, because I think the more we grow our profession and have more expert physios in the college, we then just have greater bargaining power against this rheumatologists, urologists, surgeons, and we'll have more ability to change healthcare and also being reimbursed for our knowledge, but definitely a lot more paid opportunities. What else? Yeah,
I think
there's always, yeah, that's probably.
So other ones I might add, Alicia, is that we know very well that consumers really understand a specialist and what the difference of a specialist is, and certainly the value that consumers attribute to your work is higher, which is why specialists generally charge the highest fees of physiotherapists in Australia. I think increasingly what we're finding is that, like Alicia said, we're sought by other specialists or fellows of other colleges for our expertise, and increasingly by legal professions who look for us to expert opinion, and also by insurers and compensable bodies who tend to choose specialists as their expert advisors. And a lot of those jobs are uniquely highly paid and probably some of the highest per hour paid jobs that physiotherapists have in Australia. So there's some of the opportunities. There was a question about from Frederick, which I can answer, which is, do you have only one chance to pass the exam? Well, we hope that our registrars are so well prepared, like you, Bryce, that they go through first time without any problems, but not everyone will have a good day on examinations, and we recognise that. There isn't only one chance. People are offered another chance, and importantly, someone might fail a component of the exam but pass a different component. They might pass the oral examination, the Viva examination, but fail the clinical part, in which case they're not required to complete the whole thing. So that's a good question. No, thanks, Frederick. I think other questions I had were about application, about whether or not the 3-year time frame was fixed. We had a question about, we had a question about someone that might have completed a master's in one field 3 years ago and a master's in the field they'd like to go through 2 years ago. I might throw to Elisa to answer that question. Elisa.
Thanks, Tom. So certainly the 3 years is a recommended thing just to make sure people are coming from a strong base of experience, but there is absolutely nuance in the application process, and it's thoroughly looked at by a panel and kind of examined, and also you know, the interview gives a way that people can demonstrate kind of what level of clinical expertise they're at. So I think if you're at 2.5 years and you were keen and you tick the other boxes, then definitely apply, because you know, everyone's different, and we don't all work to exactly the same time frame. So there's an understanding of that within the application process. And I think someone asked about feedback, and there also will be, if you're unsuccessful, there's absolutely opportunity for feedback about why and what you might want to work on to apply, you know, at a later stage.
Yeah, that's great, Elisa. Thank you. And I think, you know, we're really keen to see more of our titled members of the college progress onto fellowship by specialisation or by original contribution. But we want to also make sure that we accept people onto the specialisation program who are well prepared, because it's not in anyone's interest to see someone not succeed. So that's the way we've approached those things. Are there any other questions from the audience? You've got just a minute. No. Well, if there's no other questions, I'd just like to say thank you again to our panelists for coming along tonight, and thank you for our speakers. Thank you for staff for attending, and particularly thanks everyone for their interest in fellowship by specialisation, original contribution. We look forward to seeing you at the conference and hopefully receiving an application from you, if not this year, in the near future. All right, good night.